better part of about the last 10 years have been volunteering in a whole bunch of areas, education, agriculture, health, okay, and societal thinking as well. So fairly interested in understanding more, okay, about climate. So as a part of my journey to understand this, I've been writing small pieces. I've written about 60 plus pieces on understanding the science of climate, okay, more than the economic impact or the social impact. So that's basically what I do. Yeah, so the interesting piece, okay, we'll touch upon financing, okay, when it comes to climate change. Really, there's a huge gap. Okay, so pretty much if you take a look at it right now, it's the entire effort for climate change is driven largely by government policy, cap and trade, okay, and to some extent corporates. What we have missed out completely is the participation from retail, small businesses, the small farmer, and all that. Okay, that marketplace in terms of participating in carbon credits, or for that matter, carbon capture in some fashion, is totally absent. Okay, the issue pretty much is if I take a look at the carbon markets, the structure is designed in a manner that okay, you're looking at high value, low volume, low velocity transactions. Okay, so you have a bunch of guys in California, in Europe, etc. They trade carbon credits. Okay, you have the Microsofts and the Stripes of the world participate. What is missing pretty much is, let's say I'm a small farmer, okay, in Tiruthurai. I have 2 acres of land, okay, and the land is not good enough for me to earn a livelihood. If I decide that, okay, well, I want to plant trees and participate in the carbon market, there is really no financially viable way for me to do it directly without the help of a whole host of intermediaries. So fundamentally, what really happens is the share of the pie that I get as a small farmer is practically negligible. Similarly, if I take a look at a rack picker who goes, okay, takes out plastic, okay, and in some way participates in recycling plastic, he really cannot participate in the carbon market. Okay, that's a fundamental design issue. Okay, it's a financing issue and a designing issue and a design issue. So the issue pretty much is, okay, can you design a market, okay, which is low value, high volume, high velocity carbon market, where you can actually integrate, okay, the bottom of the pyramid into the entire system as such, and a higher participation leading to better outcomes. Now, obviously, over here, okay, you need to have mechanism for verification. You also need to have mechanism to finance that kind of a market, fund that kind of a market, rather, not finance. So that's one very, very clear area, okay, which is the intersection of designing a market and finance. Similarly, if I take a look at other things, okay, let's say I am looking at agriculture. Obviously, there's a huge amount of emissions that happen through agriculture. Now, if I take a look at something very simple, okay, like using hyperspectral images, okay, to really reduce my pesticide consumption, fertilizer consumption, make it more effective. The mechanism to say that, okay, hey, here is a piece of technology that hopefully can get underwritten, okay, by the government or somebody or the other, and a market participant actually taking that particular image, working, okay, with the farmer to say that, okay, hey, here is additional data that's available, which will make your agriculture more cost effective. Is there a way to fund these kind of platforms? Okay, and is there a way, okay, you can actually put together the latest that's available in technology and make it work for a small holding farmer, and in some ways get him integrated back into the entire carbon credit cycle? Should be an interesting problem at the intersection of agriculture and climate and finance. Okay, so right now, okay, we don't have a market design for this. We need to design for this. Okay, that's number one. Number two, okay, what really happens if I take a look at the problem? I mean, if I take a look at any marketplace, okay, there are really three components to it. Okay, one is the basic notion of trust. Okay, do I really trust, okay, that the market participants, they are genuine, fair, and all those kind of things? The second piece pretty much is transfer. Okay, where can I actually transfer, okay, whatever I'm buying and selling in a seamless manner? Okay. Then the third piece pretty much is the transaction itself, okay, where what's the opportunity cost of the transaction, or the cost of the transaction, not necessarily the opportunity cost. Now, the challenge pretty much is how really do I design a marketplace where all these three things they incorporated in an effective manner, okay, to permit high velocity, low volume transactions. Now, the challenge pretty much over here is if I take a look at the trust component, okay, which is verification, that's really where the bottleneck is. Okay. Now, if I am a Microsoft or whatever it is, and I want to buy carbon credits, how really do I reach reach out to a small farmer? And how do I trust that he's actually doing the job? And if I take a look at verification of carbon capture, if I'm doing a mangrove, it's very, very different from if I'm doing a bunch of trees. It's very different from if I'm doing plastic recycling. Now, the real bottleneck pretty much is you need to have a mechanism where there are people who are able to innovate around the verification piece and then integrate that into an overall marketplace. That's really where the bottleneck is. If you're able to crack the verification piece, at least in certain segments of the entire market, odds are we should be able to increase participation significantly. And you still need to design the marketplace into the registry. How do you make the entire registration process more cost effective? How really do you, like we did with KYC and Aadhaar, you'll have to do something similar, okay, to get the guys participate, okay, in some form of registry and integrate verification and transaction. That's a design issue, okay, and equally there's a research issue out there into the verification. If you're able to crack that, I think we're able to accelerate the journey significantly, simply because right now the depth of the market is too low, okay, with just the commercial or rather the large businesses and the government participating. If you need to increase the depth, you will need to solve this problem. To be honest, okay, my own gut feel, and I'm not an expert on this, I think we'll have to live with a certain level of error and ambiguity. It's never going to be accurate. Okay, simply because if I take a look at the entire climate, at the end of the day, it's a complex, it's a wicked problem, okay, or a complex problem. Now, the nature of a complex problem pretty much is there is a whole bunch of interaction effects. And because the interaction effects, okay, whatever you measure is applicable at a point in time. Okay, for you to really figure out that there is a level of persistence is extremely difficult given the dynamic nature of the system itself. So there is some level of ambiguity that we'll have to live with, which also means that, okay, when it comes to the actual verification process, we used to deterministic thinking, you need to work with probability out here. You'll say, that, okay, here is a range within which it will operate. And your entire pricing mechanism, okay, will have to work around that particular range. Okay, that's number one from a science standpoint. From a marketplace standpoint, I mean, the only real way out is I see this as a cap and trade mechanism. Unless until there's a regulatory push for cap and trade, it's going to be very difficult to push this significantly. So I think at some level, okay, the norms where you say, okay, if I'm going to do cap and trade, here's the level of ambiguity that I'm willing to live with. Okay, and here's the way I price, okay, for a probability range rather than an exact number is something that we'll have to design around. You're never going to get an accurate measurement of, hey, this is the amount of carbon. And more important, there are other aspects of the market also that needs to mature. Okay, right now we talk about carbon, but the reality is, let's say, for example, I incentivize, okay, growing trees. Okay, and as a mechanism for carbon capture that has its own, I would say, negative consequence as well. Okay, because what will really happen is when I do that, every person will go and say, okay, hey, I'm going to plant trees that grow the fastest, okay, in a certain agroclimatic region. Now, the negative consequence pretty much is you'll compromise on biodiversity significantly. Okay. So there are, if I take a look at it, it's very, very imperfect right now. And I don't think we're going to get a perfect solution. We'll have to work with a range and work with a certain level of ambiguity and work around side effects that you're going to encounter as and when you go through the journey. So that's just the way it is. And we'll have to figure out how to work around that. I just don't see a perfect solution for this. So I think, there is one step before unlocking finance. Okay, that's really a design question. Okay, so if I take a look at societal thinking, okay, the first and foremost pretty much is, so I mean, the most important part of societal thinking pretty much is agency. Okay, we are saying that, okay, hey, the agency for solution will lie, okay, with the person who needs that solution. That's a very critical piece of societal thinking. Now, over here, obviously, the climate impact is significant for the farmer, for the rack picker, for you and me. Okay. So the first design question pretty much is that, okay, well, how really do I design, okay, a platform, thinking, marketplace, call it whatever you might, okay, where the participation changes from just a Microsoft Stripe and the government to you and me and the small farmer. That's the first question. Let's say if you're able to crack the design, even to some extent, you may not be able to crack it for all cases very, very quickly. You might have to do for certain subset of problems. And if you're able to crack that, then when it comes to funding, okay, typically the way it really happens is you have stages, okay, that you need to go through. Okay, first is you have an idea. Okay, from idea, okay, you'll go to prototype, and from prototype you'll go to pilot. Okay, and from pilot, okay, you'll encounter journey, okay, where you'll scale. The idea to prototype, okay, will necessarily need to be philanthropically funded. Okay, because over there you'll not have the government participate out here. Okay, and philanthropically funded, if I take a look at it, most philanthropy funding, okay, happens is programmatic. Okay, it's not really designed for innovation. Okay, so over here, even when it comes to the funding, you need to actually put together a mechanism for design grants. Now, let's say you cross the first hurdle of prototype. The second piece, to some extent, can be milestone based. Okay, you may have some combination of design grants and you may have some combination of philanthropic funding. But the moment you get to the next level, okay, from the pilot to scale, okay, at that particular point in time, it's really the government that will have to come in from a funding standpoint. That's the way I see the funding journey happen. I think, the most important piece pretty much is I still feel we don't have enough ideas. Okay, it is still very, very top down. So whether it comes to how really do you put together a design grant and evaluate, or for that matter, how really do you increase retail participation? When I say retail participation, it is participation of people like you and me, okay, and the small farmer. That's an area where there's a huge gap, okay, and there aren't too many people working on it. So the biggest contribution that you, I, everybody can make at this stage is really ideas. And if you can contribute to ideas, a body of knowledge, that's a very good starting point. Okay, that's one thing that I would really encourage people to see how exactly we can come out with new paradigms and take it from there.